Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Wisdom in the Times of Crisis, our online event hosted by Sand, where we are looking at the opportunities and the challenges faced through this time. I am very honored. My name is Katie Gray, and I'm very honored to have Gail Brenner with us today. Gail is, to be honest, I feel like she's a nightingale. I feel like she is a song of hope and love that sings through the seemable dark night. She is a psychologist, and she has spent her life devoted to helping people work through trauma and the uncomfortable times, the shadows that they carry inside. She brings light and confidence and looking at those places in ourselves. She was the assistant clinical professor at University of California in San Francisco. She has written numerous articles and books, and we bring her here today to welcome us into our hearts and learn from her wisdom and her guidance in how to be in our hearts and how to embrace this time and find our inner wisdom when we are in the presence of crisis. Gail, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Very happy to be here. Thank you.
This is a unique time. This is I think of someone like you who has spent your probably your life, probably before you began your training and were certified with your PhD. I'm guessing you've probably been fascinated and had a gift for understanding trauma and these experiences, these undesirable experiences in life that pull us out of presence and have the capacity to feel dark. And it feels like your wisdom is called forward right now. Like your work, you've been trained for this experience to bring perspective and comfort and insight. And I'm curious for you, what has this experience been like for you? Have you felt called forward? Have you found in yourself places where you feel humbled and even as though maybe you're entering into a potential state of trauma? How has this experience been for you?
It's been so incredibly rich for me. This is, for me personally, just been an absolutely amazing time because it's enabled me to have the space and the time to go inward in a deeper and deeper and deeper way. So I wouldn't say that this time itself is igniting my own trauma from the past, but it's like situations that are arising from this time are triggering me in certain ways or have. And I feel so fierce about using these situations that come up in my reactions to these situations to go deeper into my own understanding of what arises and how I get caught, which is related to my own early trauma, and to integrate that. And I'm noticing the more and more this deep integration happens, this like generosity of heart comes forth. So the direct answer to your question is both. It's going in and being and attuning to deeper and deeper levels within, and also that freeing up more and more energy to be out there and available with others and to support as that's needed.
That is so powerful. That feels aligned with what I imagine when I think of you and when I've looked at your material and heard wonderful things about you. I feel that you've been trained for this. You're ready. This is your purpose. You are standing in the light of your purpose, and this is a powerful time to see this as an opportunity, like you say, this immense fiercity. I love that you use the word fiercity because I think that ties in with the power and the strength that we have beneath the surface. So beautiful. Thank you so much. That definitely rings true to what I imagine you to be, someone that has been trained and has worked on herself and allowed yourself to be comfortable in these areas of discomfort, so that you are ready and strong in a time of crisis like this, where maybe not everyone has done that work on themselves, or they don't feel that fiercity. Instead they feel scared. They feel like the victim. And I'm curious, with that fiercity, that strength, and that power, I think it probably takes courage to give yourself permission to find your strength and your power and your courage inside, when we've been so conditioned and trained to feel in need and dependent on the system, dependent on what we hear in the news, dependent on, where's my food coming from? What I need to hear, if it's okay for me to exhale. I feel so scared. I need to stay in my home. Yet what you're saying is that there's the strength inside of us, and you're tapping into that. In what ways can we tap into that strength and that confidence when we've been trained to be so dependent? Where do we find that independent, fierce fire within us?
We find it in the moment. You mentioned lots of problems in our society, and how do we interact with that, and excuse me, what are the messages that we get about that, and then we internalize those messages and maybe feel dependent or victimized. But in any moment, we can just stop all of that movement into the external, in the external world and what's happening, and bring our attention inward. It's not something we have to do all the time, or we should do all the time. If we're not doing that, we're not doing it right. No, it's not like that at all. It's just amazing to know that there's an opportunity in any moment to move our attention inward and to be lovingly with our own experience. And that's where the power comes. One edge for me is I'm learning that the more vulnerable I can be with my own experience in deeper and deeper levels, the more comfortable, and you're using the word confident and powerful, I feel that there's that the knowing of myself in a deeper way is revealing this innate capability of being with what is in a very strong and very very much holding a strong container for that. So we feel victimized, but that becomes an opportunity, or we feel dependent, or we feel afraid. Any of those reactions that we might call problems, they become opportunities, and they're opportunities to move our attention away from the stories and the news and the with fear, there's always some kind of story, or with victimization, there's a story, and to move our attention away from continuing to tell ourselves those stories, and instead shift it inward, bring our attention in such a loving and accepting way. So this is such an opportunity, no matter if we're feeling victimized or afraid, to move our attention inward and in a loving way. And by loving, I mean accepting and welcoming and just saying hello to our inner experience, even if it's difficult. And sometimes it's difficult. And the first thing that we want to do is avoid it and get rid of it and just want it to go away so that we feel better. But when it comes to our feelings and our inner reactions, it doesn't really work that way. And so there's always an opportunity to bring our attention in and be with ourselves in a loving way. And with that attunement to what is and the opening to all that is, we find that resilience, that we can be with our own experience. And then when we feel more flexible with it. We have other options rather than being stuck in the stories of fear or victimization. And then we might be able to bring something forward into the world or not, but just to be more comfortable in our own lives when we begin to break down the walls to our own experience.
Wow, beautiful. That is the heart of that fiercity. And like you're saying, I think sometimes we associate strength and fierce energy with being coming from a place of protection, of fear. And what you're saying is finding that fiercity from your love, from your trust, from your heart. And there's a big difference there. I think a lot of times we feel like we're in a state of love when we feel innocent and scared and open, and like we're being a good person by following what we're told and listening and retreating. We feel like we're being less of a threat. And I think, I'm identifying with what you're saying, that, true strength it's coming from your heart, and it's coming from trusting in yourself and trusting, like you said, knowing something deeper within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a unique time right now because this work on ourselves, we're kind of being forced into it. A lot of people may not be, not necessarily opt for this to be the way that they have their transformative realization of self-love and connection. So there may be a little resistance. I want to go deeper into what you're saying, because I can feel you're just a well of wisdom and knowledge and experience around a situation like this, especially. But it's my experience with people and myself, and understanding how fear works. It creates a contraction, and it's considering that all of us have probably been through trauma and fearful experiences at some point in our lives. Many of us in our youth, throughout our whole lives, dealing with continuous traumas. What if going inside is scary? What if being alone with yourself is the last place you want to be? Going within ourselves that's where the medicine is, but that's also where we feel the most vulnerable. And you're saying vulnerability is a strength, but perhaps someone was in a vulnerable space by themselves when they were hurt. And so they will do everything to distract themselves and look outside of themselves to the external world, because being with themselves is what brings them and a vulnerability that they're not comfortable with. In what ways can we bring specifically this strength to when we're completely alone? Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't have a group that we're meeting with. We're not having this conversation, you and I, while we're on a hike. We're not together. You're by yourself. We're all by ourselves. So when we're by ourselves, in what ways what are some strategies we can pierce through that fear and comfortably enter into that vulnerability with finding the fiercity of love instead of the contraction of fear?
Well, when we're alone and doing this work alone, and many of us, most of us, need community. We need to lean in. We need others to support us and to be together in a supportive community during this time. And I would say don't hesitate to do that. And there's many opportunities for that these days. We need to think about resourcing ourselves when we go into these difficult feelings. And by a resource is a very general term. It can mean anything. It can mean taking a breath. It can mean doing some gentle movement. It can mean taking a walk in nature. It can mean going inside and finding some aspect of strength, if that's possible. It could be, watching a video or putting on a guided meditation that's supportive. And for some of us, it could be distracting for a while. It's not that we should always be, making this a serious, heavy business where we always need to keep going in and meeting our hardest places. It's also important to have balance in our lives and to find ways that work for us, especially if we're alone, that bring more balance into our lives. this is it's a delicate path to go into these hard places. And one of the, I would say, ultimately the most reliable resource is our own inner witnessing. So when we get a sense of what it's like to go inside, so when we first turn our attention inward to our own experience, we first recognize that there are thoughts running, there are physical sensations in the body, there are emotions, and there may be those to one extent or another. But when we notice those, there is also this noticing presence of those different objects of our inner world, of our inner landscape. And we're witnessing, we're noticing, we're aware of these different aspects of our experience. And when we begin to bring our attention into the noticing itself, into the witness, we find that there's a safe anchor there, because the witness is the one that can hold everything. Like, the witness can see terrible things, and the terrible thing might have its own reaction, but the witness itself, and ultimately this is consciousness, this is true nature, holds everything. So we all have some sense of, or some ultimately access to, we may not feel like we have it right now, but it's there, that capability within us that's vast and open and can hold everything. But if there's not access to that, and you don't even know what I'm talking about, then it's important to just put a hand on the heart and take a breath, and to look at things that are pleasing, and not through the mind, but like really sense it's, for most of us, it's a beautiful springtime. See what we're seeing, see the colors, smell the smells, feel the air on our skin. And that brings us out of our heads and into the present moment, so that we can find some relief and some grounding here. This is where the grounding is. So if we're caught up in fear, there's probably a story running about. There are physical sensations in the body, and probably some kind of story. I mean, right now, a lot about the unknown. And if we're caught in the worry about what will be when we don't know what it is, there's fear that comes. And it's totally understandable. And we accept and welcome that fear is here. But it's how we meet that fear. Do we continue to repeat those stories in the mind? Or can we open up and really find our own loving hearts and bring that love to our own inner experience?
That is so beautiful. What medicine. Such soothing medicine. Absolutely. I found it interesting in your description how you were talking about, I had mentioned the news and the stories and the this bombardment, in a sense, of a story, that you should feel this way, you should be afraid, and it's being repeated. And if you're engaged in the news, or you have a publication that you follow, or the social media, then you're hearing this bombardment of a collective story that is constantly coming in your direction. And it's interesting how that so strongly resembles what you're addressing as well, the inner story that within our minds you should be afraid, and this is your limitation, and to hide. I think that what you're teaching us, to lay a hand on the heart and to find presence, to break out of this story, wouldn't you say that's applicable to both this bigger story and then the smaller story that we're trying to find presence through? Springtime, going outside, going for a walk, getting back into your body. Do you recommend, as you say, to almost put the story in its place? What if someone feels really engaged in hearing the audio story, the collective audio story of what to be afraid of? Here are the updates, here are the statistics, this is where we're at, this is how long this is going to last. Where's the discernment in that, of how much we should engage in listening to the bigger pain story, And two, balancing the walk outside and the hand place on the heart. If someone really feels like they need to listen to that story, what's the best way to be discerning in how we balance that? Or do we just say, you know what, it's springtime, turn it off, like it's time to go outside? What would you say to that?
Well, sometimes we do need to say, yes, it's springtime, let's turn it off and go outside. But I think what you might be speaking to is this compulsive nature that comes up in us to know. I think once we can truly accept, and not just in our minds, but like in our whole being, we just don't know a lot. And when we really open to that not knowing, that's where fear is. And if that remains unexplored, that sort of, uncertainty and then the fear behind it, then there's this compulsive worry. And that worry wants information because it wants to know so that it can calm itself down. That's the way that worry works. So that what that does, though, is it leaves us compulsively reading news and social media and all of that, which is filling our own minds with more fear-laden material. So if there's a lot of news seeking that you notice in yourself, it's good to look behind that and recognize that's probably fear-driven. And instead of, or even with, all the movement out to get the facts, which are not, there are hardly any facts out there anyway, a lot of it, they portray it as fact. It's not actually fact. It only increases our anxiety. And to let that go and instead come back and do what might sound like the harder thing to do, which is turn toward our fear and be with the fear. But ultimately, what that does is it addresses the pattern at its source, which is the fear, rather than continuing to perpetuate it over and over by seeking out more news. So two things about that. One is, if you find yourself compulsively looking at news, it's good to stop that and turn inward and see if there's fear that needs some of your loving attention in that moment. And with that fear comes the insight. And for many of us, it's a hard insight until we really see the truth of it, that we just don't know. The reality is, we never know very much at all anyway. I think this situation is just highlighting an ultimate truth about reality, that when we're fear-based and we're in our separation, we feel like we need to know. And that's, if we look pre-coronavirus, you'll probably notice that that's, somewhat, if not a lot, of driving force in your life. But when we get that we really don't know very much at all, and we stop the trying to know, and we see that we don't know, there's more potential for a relaxation into the flow of things. Because there's so many outcomes that we don't know. And when we're attached to wanting to know, there's suffering in there, there's struggle, there's a friction there, and we feel it. But when we meet the fear and we can really see truly what we don't know, and we come to some kind of peace with that because it's the fact, we just don't know, then there can be more of a relaxation around that. And with that, though, something practical, which is take breaks, turn off the news, realize what you're filling your mind and your heart and your body and your whole being with, and make wise choices about what feels right for you. So that requires, and it asks us to tune in, which is a very valuable ongoing practice for all of us all the time. Like, how is this external input for me right now? And if it feels good or somehow feels useful, fine. If it's increasing tension and increasing fear and making us more contracted, then it's time to give that a break, for sure.
Wow. That feels like something everyone needs to hear. I wonder sometimes, listening to you share this, if we're not in a cloud of a trauma that actually isn't that traumatic, but it's a story. Like you said, there are hardly any facts. When we follow the facts, then we don't have that much to feel anxious about and seeking. You know, we're constantly trying to find an answer because they give us this temporary sense of release and comfort, and we can bring ourselves back to homeostasis if I can just get more answers. But what comes with just a little bit of answer is many more unknowns. And what you're saying is it's all unknown. The big bubble has burst and we are being confronted by the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than looking for tiny little bits of answers to calm yourself down temporarily, you're saying embrace the bigger work within yourself of it's all unknown. This is basically the work, and it will be this way before this and after this and for eternity. We don't have the answers, so that's the real work. I want to quote you. You said this beautiful quote: if you're truly open, you'll put every single thing you think is true on the line, and in doing so, you live in questions, not answers. I think that's so beautiful. That kind of sums up what you're saying, that it's the answers, it's the seeking answers, it's the you know, it's almost like we're starving and they're just giving us these little allotted bits of food, and the answers, if I can just get a little bit, it will sustain me, but then I'll be hungry for more. And you're saying it's inside of you. There is a forest, a food forest within you of information and wisdom, and more sustainable than just these little increments of temporary energy. You're saying it's just all inside of us, and this is the real work right now. So powerful. I want to there's something I want to talk with you about, and it's something that you and I had exchanged a little bit about. So I'm going to change directions just a touch, but when I think about this particular crisis, and I think about those that are most vulnerable, we talked about vulnerability and how we have to enter into a space of trust within this space, you know, lean toward the vulnerability, that there's actually gifts and wisdom there. This particular crisis, it is the most frightening and destructive to elders. You know, they, in a sense, if the older you are, the more susceptible and the more vulnerable you are to this. Being someone that cares for my mother, I've been taking care of her for 6 years. She has dementia, and she's not in a nursing home right now because my sister and my husband and my sister's husband, we all take care of her together. But I imagine her, if she didn't have dementia, I imagine if I hadn't moved home to take care of her being by herself in a place, in a time with a pandemic that, you know, if it was aimed at anyone, or if someone was the most vulnerable and had reason to feel frightened and to retreat, it would be our elders. And, you know, it started in a nursing home in Seattle. You know, this particular story is very tender and sensitive to our elders. And so many of our beloved elders are who need connection the most, who need, you know, conversation and love and nourishment and support, who need help, verbally, energetically, physically, are feeling so alone and scared, probably extremely vulnerable inside of their homes. I'm curious, it feels like what you're saying is the big work, life's big work of embracing the unknown and finding the divine inside of ourselves. What, from your work with working with elders and in nursing homes and working with older generations, do you have any unique wisdom for if we are feeling especially vulnerable, we're by ourselves, and we happen to be an elder that is at risk in a time like this? What are ways that they can seek connection internally or externally?
Well, I think, first of all, I really appreciate you bringing up that question, because there are lots of people alone, but if they're young people and able-bodied, they can at least go out for walks. And maybe I'm also thinking elders have trouble with technology sometimes. So we're all Zooming, and some people may not have the equipment or the understanding of how to even do that. I'm not sure I have tremendous words of wisdom here. I know that there are communities that are supporting their elders and, bringing them food, and that's important to reach out to that. But what your question does bring up for me is the kind of, again, I want to use the word fierce, this fire for doing this inner work, because I've worked a lot with elders, and I've seen that when aging comes, which involves in it by necessity a lot of loss, a loss of functioning, maybe a loss of memory, definitely a loss of people who you've been close to your whole life. It's such an invitation for a strong spiritual journey, and it helps so much to carry on this journey when we're younger, so that we're prepared when we experience these losses, and ultimately the loss of the physical body. I think that's one of the losses that many people these days have fears about. Am I going to get sick? What is it going to look like in me? What about, am I going to end up on a ventilator? Am I going to die? Or is someone close to me going to die? And these stories are reality because we see them on the news every day. And for me, sure, we can cope, we can seek out other, like-minded people. We do our best to support each other. And many of our rituals in many of our cultures around when someone is sick or someone is old or someone has died, they're around the community coming together. That's where we find that support. And now, all of that ritual is challenged, which makes this an even fiercer time. And it's an opportunity. We are alone, so we go within. And ultimately, we're alone. When we die, we're alone. So how are we going to meet that? How are we going to meet the fearful things going on now? And to begin or carry on that exploration, because it's I want to say, a matter of life and death. And I can say from my own experience, it's a matter of suffering or happiness. And not happiness like, smile on your face, happiness all the time. But it's doing that exploration ultimately is untangles all of those struggles so that there's a much greater sense of peace. And to be older, to be on the precipice of being elderly, is a wonderful, hopefully, incentive for doing this exploration, because there is a way out, and there's a way to be with all of this, all of these tangles and all of these potential losses and real losses in ways that are, that have grace to them. And we can pull on grace when we need it most, when we're down and out and in our hardest places. So for me, it's an invitation to do this work. And for elders now, there are lots of people now who I think are suffering greatly because we're a distracted society. We go out, we ingest, we consume, and much of that has been taken away. So we don't have our normal defenses and our normal ways of coping. And it's very, very hard for many people, but it also can be the inspiration for an inner journey, and ultimately a journey of peace and acceptance and love.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, you're right. I think I so resonate with what you're saying. My heart on a daily basis aches for our forgotten elders. And like you said, if you're young and your immune system is strong and your body is fit and you're not personally worried, sometimes we can forget about those all around us that are silently worrying. and that are feeling very alone. I'm just going to say that for all the rest of us that do feel like we're strong and empowered, this is our opportunity and mission, and it should be our incentive to reach out, to reach beyond the internet and the Zoom calls and the social media, and leave love letters in mailboxes, and check in with our community and see what we can do as the younger generations to integrate our forgotten members that are very much a powerful part of this circle and who are on the outskirts. We need to bring them. I think of elders often as the suns that have been sent out as lone stars, and we need to bring them back to the center of the solar system and orbit around them, bring them home into the center. Oh, thank you so much. When you say find grace, I love the word. I love what grace embodies. What are ways that you personally, I also really loved laying your hand on your heart, going outside, giving yourself the opportunity to turn it off, and giving yourself permission to turn off the collective story, turn off the internal story, find presence. Do you have tangible personal tools and techniques that you use? Each of us are different, but you're such a dynamic and you have a wealth of information and experience in this, having dealt with trauma yourself and figuring out ways to overcome it. Like you've said in your book, suffering is a choice. How do we make that choice? What are tangible tools? We can put our hands on our hearts. You said, take a deep breath. Are there other ways that you would suggest, other little helpful tools to keep in our back pockets during this time?
I find it really helpful to, and this time supports this, is to slow everything down. And it goes against the grain because we have quite a fast moving society, but there's no substitute for being conscious of our own experience. Like, we can't open up to the awe and wonder that's possible to know in the present moment if we're running at warp speed onto the next thing. So there's this opportunity to come back, to slow down, and then to open up to what's here. And what's here might be, the thoughts and feelings, the emotions, maybe a lot of mental activity and all of that. But if we see that, and then we include even a greater field around that, that's where we begin to go beyond the mind and beyond the stories and even beyond the separation of the human body and the human personality. And we can touch into and directly experience the wonderment of everything that's here right now in the very simple things. So in my life personally, I'm busy, I do things, but then I also take plenty of time. I meditate every day for about 20 minutes. I slow things down. And I've gotten, actually, and this is one of the gifts of this time in particular, because I can feel this deepening in me, is my attunement into my own experience is getting very refined. So when I feel off, like I have a conversation and I come away like, oh, that didn't feel good, or I don't feel good inside, I don't just go on to the next thing. I use that right there and then in that moment as an opportunity for exploration to know what is it that's arising in me, because my nervous system is somehow reacting to what just happened. And then for me, a shorthand I'm learning is to ask, like, how is that situation that just happened, that I have this feeling about, related to my own early trauma? And I'm getting very good at doing that. I mean, for me, it's all about attunement. When I don't feel attuned to, I don't feel like someone got me or heard me or listened to me, I have almost always some kind of reaction. And as I can notice those reactions very quickly now is happening for me, because I've done this for a long time. It's very helpful to stay that close to myself and to my body and to my just sort of my energy of what's happening, so that I can catch these things early. but we can't do that unless we slow down. So the slowing down and turning inward and being curious, those are the ways that I stay grounded. I also have a strong yoga practice. I exercise every day, and even more so these days. So that's kind of a happy side effect. I'm getting even fitter than I was before. Excuse me. So yes, so these are the things that are helping me personally. But like you said, everybody has their own way. And I also reach out to people a lot, and I feel very connected actually during this time. But everybody needs to find their own way with that. But what I encourage everybody to do is start this journey of finding a way to be with yourself. You don't have to sit in your own suffering and just have that like flood you or overwhelm you. Sometimes it does, and that's what it does sometimes. But then we bring forth our resources. We slow it down. We take a breath. We do a little movement. We reach out to someone. We, do a real hug of ourselves. We, whatever it is for you that gives you a little bit of relief in that moment. And it's really just about the moment. We want to, in our minds, we want these bad feelings to go away. We want to be able to do this all with wonderful grace and, no, it's just about the moment. Like, what can I bring to this moment that's going to help me feel a little bit more at peace? That's really the question, rather than trying to solve problems at a macro level.
Embracing the unknown and working,
Yeah.
slowing things down, looking at one piece at a time.
Exactly.
I love where you brought in the if something throws you off. I mean, you could apply that to if it's interpersonal exchange, or if it's something that you hear, or there's a statistic that throws you off, to give yourself the opportunity to take a moment, to not bury it down and quickly distract yourself. But like you're saying, take a moment to just be with it. And I think I probably am also absorbing from what you're saying that regardless if that's a positive experience within yourself or a negative experience within yourself, to give yourself that permission, because you have that fierce wisdom and strength inside of you. You can handle to just breathe into whatever comes up. Like you're saying, it may be your time with yourself is this powerful work, but it may not always be this beautiful hug. It may be a memory from childhood, but to give yourself that permission to at least slow down and take that moment to be with what's coming up, to feel your reaction, and to understand why are you spinning off into more fear.
And I'd like to add, if I could, if it feels overwhelming or paralyzing, if it's really like a lot of fear or whatever the emotion might be, it's hard to do that on our own. We need help for these very, very strong and tender places in us. So that's a time to reach out, to go to a daily meditation group, and there are free ones online, to reach out to someone, or even distract in the moment if it's too much emotion, to be able to welcome on your own. When we're talking about trauma, people are at all different places with that. And, when we've been working with it a while and we have some skills and we know how to use our resources, we're kind of flowing with that. But for some people, it's very, very hard. And we have great compassion for that. And that's a time to reach out. And there are lots of, free resources for doing that in this time that we're in.
Yeah, like you're saying, finding a group, going.
Yeah,
I think especially during this time, it seems like a lot of opportunities where there's no charge. There's groups gathering together.
That's right.
That's wonderful. And also, you're an author. Like, explore books. This is what a wonderful time to read, and to, if you're able to order something online, to potentially get books that welcome new tools and the importance of this being an opportunity to go within yourself and find that fierce strength. And if you do feel yourself suffering, to, you know, to acknowledge that and to find some resources of support, that you're not alone. There is support out there.
And I love your saying that, because it becomes a lifestyle. Like the more we really take on this path, it becomes a lifestyle. Like, just to speak for myself for a second, I love this. I just love it with all my heart. And it's brought me so much benefit and happiness and to the deepest peace in my life. And so it feeds on itself to keep going on this path. But it's, you know, to read, to listen to guided meditations, to do Zoom meetings, to, you know, have like-minded friends that you reach out to be willing to do the hard work, you know, all of that feeds on itself in this beautiful, rich, and deepening way.
Oh, thank you so much, Gail. You're such a darling. You're so wonderful.
Thank you.
I feel as though we're probably trimming down on our time. I would love to offer our viewers, our attendees, a beautiful vision, an intention, a blessing from you of where we could, if we had a beautiful landscape of a garden, what are some seeds of intention, or a vision that could be an internal vision or a collective vision, to, you know, like you said, the stories can encircle us and encompass us and pull us into this place of retreat. But what's a way that we can use the power of our minds and our vision and our hearts to set a new intention? You know, you've given us a lot of incredible tools, and it would be nice to have a vision that as we're all finishing up this interview together, where can we all go in our thoughts to visualize?
So two things come up for me. One is, and it may not sound like super sexy, but it's like just finding peace in the moment. Like taking any given moment, whatever it might be, whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, however contracted you might feel, and begin to, with the powers of observation and witnessing and loving witnessing, let's say, begin to untangle those patterns or those feelings that take us over, so that we can begin to open up to a greater and richer experience of the present moment, which is where we become peaceful with what is. So it's bringing our attention in. And the other thing that comes up for me in response to that question is about seeing how much we can flow with what's happening. So it's a movement from doing and fixing and I got to know and I got to prepare myself, to a relaxation into exactly what's here and what's been given. So we go from doing to receiving and allowing, and just have the idea that everything that's given, it's given. It's not made, it's given. And so how receptive can we be? How can we move with what's happening? How can we receive whatever it is as if we've chosen it with our whole heart? Because then we're way less at odds with what's happening, and we're more in the flow with things as they are. So that for me has been, and that leaves you not knowing, right? Like, I don't know where I'm going to go next. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's like a joyous not knowing, because it's like a mystery ride. You know, it's not a fearful not knowing, like, I got to know. It's like, I am going to serve whatever comes to me, and I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to be humble with that, and I'm going to bow to that. And that becomes a beautiful surrender and movement with the flow of life.
Oh, I love that. Freedom from needing to know and just being. That is so beautiful. Well, thank you, Gail, for bringing us out of our heads and into our hearts today.
It's been pleasure.
It's been so wonderful. And I yeah, I say thank you from all of us that are getting to witness your wisdom and hear your comforting and soothing words. We look forward to seeing you again and being connected with you again in future sand gatherings, whether online or physical.
Thank you so much, Katie. Beautiful. I loved your questions and your pure heart. It comes through. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for tuning in.